Terrorism is the use of criminal violence to provoke a state of terror or fear, mostly with the intention to achieve political or religious aims. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and our daily wrap-up on UATV, doing our best in explaining complex things in simple terms. The term terrorism is used in this regard primarily to refer to intentional violence during peacetime or in the context of war against non-combatants, mostly civilians and neutral military personnel. Russia is a terrorist state. We are not asking a question or citing anyone. We in Ukraine see with our own eyes how Putin's Russia uses criminal violence to provoke a state of terror in our country. Who exactly on Putin's behalf is killing and torturing us? Private military company Wagner, that is a de facto Putin's pocket army. Its main advantage and the existing goal in one is obvious: to neglect the law, to murder civilians, to spread fear, havoc, and destruction wherever they go on behalf of the Kremlin. Oh, and by the way, they are double outcasts. Private military contractors are officially forbidden in Russia. But what's officially for an official like Putin? Wagnerites are well linked to neo-Nazis and far-right extremists and have taken part in various conflicts around the world: Syria, Libya, the Central African Republic, and Mali. Criminal army for a criminal king doing criminal things indeed. The accusations include rapes and robberies of civilians and torturing accused deserters. Estimated total number of Wagner PMC in Ukraine is around 50,000 people. About 10,000 people are mercenaries who decided to join the structure. The rest are former inmates. About 1,000 Wagnerites have been eliminated by our army. In only recent weeks, 90% of them were inmates. Prigozhin literally throws bodies into the meat grinder at Bakhmut, said U.S. National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications John Kirby. Fighters of PMC Wagner are currently fighting, mainly in Bakhmut, where bloody battles have been going on in recent weeks. Their Kremlin boss, Prigozhin, spends about $100 million a month on support of the group. According to the United States, in November, the group began receiving weapons, including missiles from North Korea. Kirby promised that the United States would introduce additional sanctions against the group in the upcoming weeks. Please do, sir. The Wagner PMC is a terrorist group. Again, we are not putting it as a question and are not waiting for any internationally renowned authority, let it be even The Hague itself, to call things what they actually are and how we see them with our own eyes here in Ukraine. We state the bare, dead cold fact. Wagner is a terroristic offspring of Russia on a bloody rampage of its dictator's obsessive quest for power and influence. Founded by businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin, the Wagner PMC has been operating even in the Central African Republic since the local government turned to Russia for weapons and security assistance in 2017. These are African criminals who committed terrorist attacks on local villages and are notoriously known for their brutality: murder, rape, and armed robbery. According to Radio Liberty, Prigozhin's people, including military instructors and political technologists, work in at least 25 African countries. Only think about it. PMC Wagner recruits thugs in Africa for them to fight for Russia in Ukraine. Some more interesting facts about Wagnerites. Wagner's first commanding officer, Dmitry Utkin, who actually named the group Wagner after Hitler's favorite composer because of his obsession with Nazism and Third Reich. Today, most of the regular army and PMCs refuse to fight in Ukraine, terrified to engage in World War II Red Army-style headlong attacks that kill hundreds, if not thousands, of Russian troops just to take one fortified position. Initially, Putin began with paying to enlist ignorant cannon fodder, but when governors of the regions complained that they're running out of money, had to announce mobilization to get cannon fodder for free. Prigozhin is storing penal colonies to conscript inmates, offering them full pardon if they survive. By mid-October, he conscripted up to 20,000 prisoners out of 350,000 that are behind bars in Russia. This is Prigozhin himself. The quality of the picture is no good, but mind that poster on the prison's wall, upper left corner of the video? It says in Russian, "Choose life," and uses Z symbolics. Ain't that a crazy Orwell Poe mixture? Choose life and go to war and die there, you ignorant cannon fodder? Lovely. Before the arrival of Prigozhin to a given penal colony, prison wardens prepare a list of so-called thieves-in-law who are of great authority between inmates who want to buy a ticket out of jail and not go to war. And you know, they never do. Allegedly, hundreds of mobsters' gang heads have been released this way. They just lay low until they get their pardon. Usual low-in-rank criminals actually happen to get to the front line. Since no one trusts those conscripted inmates, they are delivered at the front line in handcuffs and are placed in prisons again. For them, there are only three possibilities to leave the hostility zone: to die, to return to the colony, to gain freedom as a disabled person missing at least one limb. Putin does not agree to any other options, and any other promises made are false. The Russian Federation released in the fall of 2022 thousands of murderers, armed them, and fully legitimized to engage in looting on one hand, and on the other hand, forced to fight under the threat of being shot at the spot. And a never-fulfilled promise to be well paid. Prigozhin and company currently attempts to lobby a law in the State Duma to retroactively legitimize within the framework of the national legislation the release of more than 20,000 prisoners. That despaired, ignorant, embittered cannon fodder could be someone's future brothers in arms? PMC Wagner is a gate of hell on earth, unleashing tens of thousands of damned souls for an imminent destruction. This way or another, in despair, they deliver nothing but destruction and terror. What else is it but a terrorist organization in a terrorist state than? Ukraine was one of the first to realize the perniciousness of Russian propaganda, and back in 2014 banned the broadcasting of 14 Russian TV channels, including RT, Russia Today. In 2020, Russian RT TV channels were also banned from broadcasting in Lithuania and Latvia. The reason for the blocking was the connection of the media with Kiselyov, who is under European sanctions. In March 2022, Europe imposed sanctions on RT English, UK, Germany, France, Spanish, and stopped broadcasting them in Europe countries. Russia has excluded media outlets based in the US and allied countries. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Radio Free Europe, Deutsche Welle, BBC, and other news sources are no longer legally available there in Russia. A self-imposed digital iron curtain has descended across Europe, enforced in part by the new draconian Russian law, criminalizing the distribution of false information about the Ukraine conflict. The bill that criminalizes the intentional spreading of what Moscow deems to be fake reports has been quickly rubber-stamped by both houses of the Kremlin-controlled parliament and signed by Putin almost 10 months ago, imposing prison sentences for up to 15 years for those spreading information that goes against the Russian government's narrative of the war. And that narrative always was and always will be only one. It is fine to kill Ukrainians. It is legit. Moreover, it is necessary. This is today's Russia, and its state media Russia Today is just another side of the same coin. It is called Russism, a modern form of a fascism. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba noted that the broadcast of Kremlin-controlled TV channels actually incite the genocide of Ukrainians. And these resources should be banned in all countries of the world. It explicitly states that the aim of Russian missile strikes is destroying energy infrastructure. And a State Duma deputy commented that this is a manifestation of sacred hatred for Ukrainians and aims to force the civilian population to demand surrender.
Incitement of genocide on Russian state TV is in full swing. They admit Russia bombs out Ukraine's critical infrastructure to inflict unbearable conditions of life on civilians, and they call for more strikes. Russian state propaganda in the European Union and elsewhere must be fully banned. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
You know, sometimes I just wonder what Putin will do with Ukraine if, in his ill dreams, of course, he gets what he wants. I mean, 40 million of partisans? Seriously? What then? But then I wake up to reality and remind myself that madmen just do not have any long-term goals. There is no then for Putin. But the issue is not only in TV itself. After all, Russian propaganda is trying to get into the head of Europeans in every possible way, including that through the internet. Therefore, the Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, Alexander Tkachenko, insists that all long as Russian propaganda oozes everywhere, so must be the ban everywhere. Not only on TV channels, but also Russian high-tech publics and podcasts that exist in Europe, on various platforms and web resources where Russian propagandistic media is still present. For example, according to Tkachenko, in order to limit Russian propaganda's venomous influence on social networks, it is necessary to collaborate with high-tech businesses, mainly of them are in America, while continuing to push the Russian propaganda ban idea through by talking with European regulators. At the level of the European Commission, such decisions have already been made. But systematic work is very important, the minister noted. He said that the information security centers are analyzing the information continuously, so the ministry very much hopes that the proposals of Ukraine, which were sent to EU ministers regarding the so-called informational Rammstein, including proposals to criminalize not only the Russian propaganda itself, but its carriers and distributors in all possible world media and information sources. On December 19th, the IMF adopted a 4-month monitoring program for Ukraine, which, according to the participants of the negotiations, opens the door to the next program with extensive financing. A few days before this event, a small NBU delegation led by the new head of the National Bank, Andrei Pushny, went to Washington to personally meet with the leadership of the International Monetary Fund and get to know representatives of the U.S. state structures on the eve of important decisions for Ukraine. As per National Bank's head, Ukrainians' resilience is helping arrest a plunge in economic growth, and inflation is accelerating slower than expected in the face of Russia's campaign to destroy the nation's energy infrastructure.
We've already discussed that this resilience driver should be taken into account by the central bank's research staff. We are kind of a laboratory that the world can study to improve forecasting. Andrei Pyshny, governor of the National Bank of Ukraine, in an interview with Ukrinform.
Households and businesses have kept working and avoided spreading panic in the currency and banking markets. In a show of resistance as the war enters its 11th month by now, National Bank of Ukraine Governor Andrei Pyshny said in an interview, that may be enough for the economy to level off or grow slightly next year after a more than 30% of contraction this year.
That the economy, and this is an amazing thing, shows adaptability, resilience and flexibility. Ukrainians are modeling unique behavior in unprecedentedly stressful situation. Andrei Pyshny, governor of the National Bank of Ukraine.
Even with the economy ministry questioning whether next year's growth forecast will materialize, Pyshny said there is a reason for optimism. He attributed a slower-than-expected decline in the third quarter to the efficiency of air defense systems, relatively quick repairs to the power grid, and the unbreakable will of the Ukrainian people. In the best-case scenario, the central bank sees the economy expanding as much as by 1% next year, matching the International Monetary Fund's outlook, according to Pyshny. The tendency toward improvement however, is no reason to cut interest rates. Yet, he said, as the Monetary Policy Committee has an unanimous understanding that the balance of inflation risk is upward, price growth is likely to accelerate in the first quarter before starting to slow in the second quarter. The government in Kiev plans to work with an IMF mission in February and move to review the provisional program the following month. Part of the discussion is whether the Washington-based lender will stick to its tenet of not lending funds to countries at war. Pushny said there was a chance to come to an agreement.
The discussion taking place now within the International Monetary Fund gives us optimism. We are now rewriting rules. This full-scale war should force a rethinking of regulation and approaches not only in international financial organization, but also in international politics. Andriy Pushny, governor of the National Bank of Ukraine, in an interview with Ukrinform.
This was the sweet part. Of course, there is a bitter one as well. Time. The tight deadlines to fulfill the requirements to get help Ukraine needs. Ukraine is ready to move in the direction of developing our relationship with the IMF as quickly as possible. Is IMF ready? Let us remind you that IMF financing is subject to reforms, structural obligations, accountability, and generally about very ambitious goals in the conditions of a full-scale war. So the question of time is very important for us. Mr. Pushny promises to do everything to ensure that the team of the National Bank moves in the direction defined by the memorandum, so that already in March we start discussing a large program with our partners in IMF, which already involves direct financing. The matter cannot be postponed any further. We all know that bankers just do not usually like to lend money to the countries at war, but it is very likely that, amongst others exceptions, that came quite a surprise to the world, Ukraine will be entitled for another exception. Citing National Bank's head, Ukraine does not need charitable aid, but investments in order to survive and continue development. I would like to only add a small remark: in order to win, for the sake of the whole world. It was Henry Kino on UATV, doing our best to explain complex things in simple terms for you. Stay safe and tuned.